Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here at 2024 Week 0 predictions. Long awaited, Nick. It's been a long off season. College football will be back in a couple of days. We'll be breaking down all 4 games here with predictions for the August 24th slate. Kicking off with the Dublin series, a good one here. Florida State, Georgia Tech. The Noles obviously coming off a disappointing end to its season, missing out on the playoffs. And then a big loss to Georgia with a tremendous amount of opt-outs. Now they're going to be back at full strength with some new added pieces. This is obviously an interesting game, 12.5-point line for Florida State. At least that's what it was a day or two ago. I think it's down to about 11.5 now. You certainly want to look at the matchup between FSU's rushing attack and Georgia Tech's run defense. DJ Uyunglele, obviously, a big character here, transferring to his third different school. His legs are going to be used in the run game, I think, of his physicality, his ability to fall forward. And I don't think this Florida State backfield is all that great in terms of top-end talent, but I think they have some nice quality depth, and I think you're going to see numerous guys. Probably about 4 different players have 5+ carries. Roydell Williams, a power back. Lawrence Tafali, a guy who has some versatility. And then Jalen Lucas, I think he has tremendous speed and some upside as well. Going against a Georgia Tech team, Nick, again, that was horrendous against the run a season ago. Kyle Kennard, their top player, he transfers out from this defensive line. There was a lot of guys really up front on this D-line. That's going to be the biggest matchup for me, though, even though they do have some guys like Thomas Gore, Zeke Biggers, and I think Kyle Effort at linebacker is a tremendous player. How improved do you think they'll be in this game against the run? Because that's going to be the biggest matchup here for Florida State, because the Georgia Tech secondary is a quite sound unit, and FSU isn't all that great at wide receiver either, so I think you're going to see a heavy dose of FSU run game.
It's a very exciting matchup to kick off the season as they play at the Aviva Stadium over there in Dublin, Ireland. A fantastic way to start the season. This is the 5th matchup at that stadium to kind of kick off this season. This is the 3rd matchup as well. It's a conference battle. We saw Northwestern Nebraska do battle 2 years ago. It was a really highly entertaining game. Last year's game between Notre Dame and Navy was a little less entertaining, but bringing a conference matchup here I think is quite interesting on this week 0. The spread, 12.5, when you look at it, it's quite interesting when you look at that. A lot of people are very high on Florida State, having them as a playoff team after what happened last year. Georgia Tech, you and I both think this team is pretty solid, especially on offense. I really like what they have on the ground. I think Hayes King's a really solid quarterback, plus Jamal Haynes is a really solid running back. To answer your question, I think Florida State's going to have to run the ball a lot in this game if they want to get success early on. I don't trust what they have at the wide receiving core. Yes, they brought in some decent pieces. Malik Benson, Jalen Brown are solid adds. Plus, they have some nice freshmen. Elijah Moores, when you look at it in the slot. They bring in DJ to play at quarterback. DJ didn't work last time he was in this conference playing at Clemson. Obviously had a completely horrendous time. I've always been a big believer in DJ. I always thought he had what it takes to be a star. I was disappointed it didn't work out at Clemson. I thought he was okay at Oregon State, but he really hasn't got to that ceiling, and I don't know if he can at this moment in time. They're going to have to rely on running the ball, which is going to go through Roydell Williams, who, we don't know if Roydell Williams is going to be able to take that number 1 running back mantle. We saw him in spurts at Alabama look good, but now trying to take over and be that top back may be difficult. I do like what Georgia Tech has in the trenches, and I think they can figure it out and get some pressure. I think Kyle Effort's a really strong linebacker, which is why I have this score being a little bit closer than probably most people do, because I do think Georgia Tech will be able to hang in, and Florida State's going to have trouble on offense to trying to figure out what pieces are going to work best in this new puzzle.
Yeah, good offensive line for FSU, one of the nation's best units, a lot of leadership, a lot of veterans up there. I think one thing to certainly look for is I definitely think the run game will click. Will it be an elite dose? I'm not sure, but I think they'll certainly be in that 4 to 5 yards per carry category. And, in the passing game, you'll probably see a lot of quick game. I think you'll see some deeper strikes off play action because Uyunglele really thrives with intermediate crossing routes and deep goes off of play action. Will they have the speed downfield to be able to put it on them? I don't know. You guys like Malik Benson, Ja'Kai Douglas are going to be your top targets. And for Georgia Tech, like I said, it's a very interesting offense, one that we gave a lot of praise to. Haynes King certainly needs to cut down on his turnovers. They have a lot of guys, though. Malik Rutherford's very good. Eric Singleton, Jamal Haynes at running back. I mean, these are all very good players with that dual threat quarterback. It's going to be tough for the Jackets to run straight at Florida State, though, but with the variety and speed they have, attacking the edge often seems likely. Instead of just running straight down the pipe, I think jet sweeps, wide receiver screens. To get this defense loosened up will be a frequent game plan, I'd assume. Obviously, a good matchup they have is Patrick Payton against left tackle Ethan McKinney, who really struggled last year. What do you think of this Florida State defense that's got plenty of good guys? The aforementioned Payton, Joshua Farmer, guy you're incredibly high on. still very deep in the trenches, not as good as they were last year, so I think there'll be some more resistance against the run this season. And I think Georgia Tech could be in for a very good day against this run defense that at times wasn't as good last season. And obviously they have a bit of a makeover at the linebacking room with DJ Lundy being the only returnee. So what's the success level you're expecting from the Jackets on the ground?
I think the Jackets will be able to get some nice production on the ground. I do think Patrick Payton and Josh Farmer will have good days. I think they'll be part of the difference making that gets Florida State over the line here. I think Farmer's going to have an incredible season. Payton really strong coming off that left side. I think, Georgia Tech does have a lot of opportunity to be able to dominate on the ground in this game. I think the linebacking core for Florida State's weaker than it was last year. They only bring back DJ Lundy. They replace a lot of different pieces there, which creates some problems. And Jamal Haynes is a really solid back. Trey Cooley, I think he's an underrated back who has got some good experience as well as a transfer that can be involved in Hayes King. Can run on the ground, use his legs. He's a solid player as well that can be really creative and dynamic as a quarterback. I think that Georgia Tech, they're going to want to pound the rock here. That's kind of the game plan for this offense is run the ball, see what they can do with it. Let King and Haynes kind of figure things out between themselves. They could certainly throw the ball. They have a decent wide receiver room. I think the playbook could certainly open up if they find themselves in a very tight game. But I do like the opportunity here for them to run the ball, ground and pound, and try and attack that linebacking core for Florida State that's a little bit weaker than it was last year.
Yeah, I think the run D for Georgia Tech, on the other hand, should be better, but to what tune as they do lose their top 4 tackle for loss guys. Do add some solid players. I think overall you're going to see both of these run games have success. I think both teams will find often open area off-play action because I think both secondaries will probably have a relatively good game. So I think you'll see the clock probably wind down faster than people expect in this game. Haynes King, again, has to cut down on the turnovers. They will probably be finding themselves behind in this game by numerous scores. We both have Georgia Tech covering, Nick. I think they can flat out win this game straight up, and I know that's kind of crazy to say. That's no disrespect to FSU. I think Georgia Tech certainly has a good ball club coming into this season. That's just kind of how I see this game playing out, though, Nick, is both run games having success. I think Florida State will be more prone to more stops than Georgia Tech will, getting the W in Ireland before a quick turnaround next week. In week 1, will they play on a Monday night? Odd start to the year for Florida State scheduling-wise. They'll start the season 1-0, most likely.
I have Florida State winning this game as well, but I think it's going to be quite close. I have a 7-point win. When you look at Georgia Tech right now, according to Caesars in New York, they're plus 360 underdogs. Quite interesting when we look at the lines move to 11.5 in New York. I still think that Georgia Tech will cover 11.5. I think they'll cover 12.5. I really do think this is a team that has a really solid offensive game plan here potentially. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, and Florida State will as well. So I do agree with your notion. It'll probably be a quicker game. The clock's going to be running a lot during this one. I think you're going to see King and Jamal Haynes run the ball a lot. A really nice combo there with those two, and they're going to try and attack that middle of the defense where the run defense I think is just going to be weaker from the linebackers on Florida State. I like Florida State and the Noles to get this job done and win this game, but it's going to be a little cagey. These first games are always a little cagey. You kind of come out, you're trying to feel out what your new offense is going to look like. I think DJ has a lot to feel out with his new teammates, considering some of them are transfers, some of them are guys he hasn't played with before. They're plugging a new running back as well. Definitely an entertaining matchup. I think it's going to be one of those matchups where there's going to be a lot of strong defensive stops and will be a very entertaining game out there in Dublin, Ireland to kick off the season.
They'll get your Saturday started at noon. Right after that at 4 o'clock on FS1 from Albuquerque. A game that's really for the degenerates, Nick, but this is what we love about Week 0, these random games that we can throw some money on and also provide some great knowledge for the people that also want to get some action on these contests. Montana State moving over to play an FBS school from their FCS level in New Mexico, 9-point favorites right now. 53.5 is the total. And obviously, when it comes to the research on Montana State, we're going to hit you with the knowledge. This is a team that runs the ball about 40 times a game. They had 2 quarterbacks involved heavily in that ground and pound. Tommy Malote, 689 and 5 touchdowns, 8.1 yards per carry for him. Sean Chambers was very good, but he departs. So we'll see if someone can really pick up the slack that he's now going to not have to provide. Julius Davis at running back, 718 and 7 yards per carry. This team ran for nearly 300 yards per game last season. Offensive line, they returned 3 starters, 2 great ones in Justice Perkins, 41 career starts to him. Mega starter there, Marcus Ware at right tackle was the highest graded tackle in FCS last season. He was elite in all regards. They're facing a New Mexico defense that was 106th against the run in FBS last year. Taking guys back like Kyler Drake and Gabriel Lopez. Neither were exactly great. Did combine for 10 TFL though. Add some new faces and guys like DeJohn Benton, who's 270 pounds. Devin Brandon Epps, who was solid at Old Dominion in the rotation. And Antoni Harris from Illinois State, who wasn't all that splendid himself. And of course, you want to look at the linebacking duo, largely played last season by Dimitri Johnson, Mihalis Santaronis. Neither were good, while a true sophomore, Jane Wilson, will join him in the starting lineup. A lot of information there, Nick, but obviously when it comes to these matchups between two different divisions, you wonder which one really have the edge. I think Montana State will be good, but they're not going to be great because this still is a team that largely should have better talent, even if the discipline and coaching is slightly behind.
A very interesting Montana State team, a very interesting matchup here against New Mexico. If you thought the first game was going to be a quick game, I think this will be a quick game as well. I think Montana State's going to run the ball an absolute ton against this New Mexico defense here. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Montana State to try and run the ball ground and pound. They ran the ball 40 times per game last year. Like you said, I think they're going to be able to run the ball a whole lot in this game. They do have a solid running back room that returns enough pieces. The quarterback, I think he's a very capable runner, as you saw, nearly 700 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground last year. Expect him to be involved, Tommy Mellott, to run the ball a lot. They're going to have a lot of different opportunities to move the ball on the ground. I think they have a really big opportunity to be physical on the ground game and absolutely dominate what is a weak defensive line for the New Mexico Lobos here, as well as a pretty weak linebacking core. I like what they have in the opportunity. This is an interesting matchup as you have an FCS versus an FBS team, where the FCS team they're a favorite by 9 points. You don't see that a whole lot in this day and age, considering how wide the talent gap is. So obviously, the bookmakers have an idea as well of what's going on here. This is a very strong Montana State team from the FCS level. They were very competitive last year with the big dogs in that level. We saw them, compete with South Dakota State, some other big programs, NDSU as well. So this is a very strong team that's matching up here against this New Mexico team.
Yeah, and you want to continue looking at that defense. The secondary for the Lobos was never really bad, but they do lose both starting corners. They only recorded 4 picks as a team last year, ranking 130th in fewest takeaways, while Montana State was second in all of FCS in fewest giveaways. So that's a very important note. If you want to get action on this game, right there, those numbers, opportunities to create seem to be very scarce. Montana State only throws about 20 times a game anyways. Mellott is all right, 62%, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. Does get back his top wide receiver, Tom McCullough, who averaged about 19 yards per catch a season ago. Looking at the other side of the ball, New Mexico only returns 2 starters on offense. A unit that was 45th in yards, put up over 27 points per game. They lose an elite runner in Ja'Cory Merritt, added a solid transfer to compete with Andrew Henry, though, and Eli Sanders from Iowa State. The entire offensive line is made up of transfers, most of them being 300 plus 10 pounds, but either they played a good bit at the FCS level or not at all at the FBS level. That's kind of what they've made up of, and now they face a team that did lead the FCS in sacks per game. Top 4 sack getters are gone. Kenneth Eden and Zach Cruz, though, combined for 7.5 last fall. Rylan Ort was the second leading tackler at linebacker. Danny Ulicapia was also a top tackler who will be next to him. So those are the guys who are getting back to face up this pretty much makeshift offensive line. Devon Dampier will step in at quarterback. Looked good in his sparring appearances. Has dual threat capabilities. Has 2 of the top 5 leading pass catchers alongside him returning. Caleb Medford being the standout versus a team that was 37th in FCS in pass defense. They do get back their top 3 corners led by John Johnson, who had 11 plays on the ball. They also have a pretty good safety in Blake Stillwell as well. How do you think the Lobos match up on this side of the ball, Nick? Again, you got to take into account that they should have a little bit more talent, but again, the discipline and overall playmaking on the other side is also too great to ignore. These are always just pull the rug. Who really or you think is going to have the advantage? I guess it's kind of always up in the air until we actually see them get on the field.
I still think Montana State will have the advantage, but I do think there are some upsides to this offense. The quarterback play that New Mexico returns is not bad. I think their quarterback was solid last year, who could be a decent player to plug back into this system. He was not bad, and Dampier, that is, and he has returning some of his pass catches, which certainly helps, but losing his top runner in Ja'Cory Merritt is a big loss. His team did score 27 points per game last year, which is a solid number, but losing that elite a balance on the rushing attack is tough. I think you plug in Eli Sanders, who's not bad, who I think who could really step up and be a solid running back for this team. The offensive line worries me being plug and play. Yes, they're all big, but they're guys that have various experiences kind of plugging and playing. I think that certainly damages this New Mexico offense. When you look at the defense doesn't return enough, in my opinion, to be involved. Yes, Rylan Ort is not a bad player and a solid linebacker, second leading returning tackler. When you could see him potentially be strong in that interior. I think the 2 linebackers are very solid, but the defense does worry me, especially on the interior. And I think when you have this Montana State team that can run the ball, it could cost fits for this defensive line, and I don't think the New Mexico offense will be able to run the ball as effectively as their counterparts, and will put them in a bit of a hole.
Looking at Montana State's results from last year, they lost 3 of 4 games by 4 points or less. That includes South Dakota State and North Dakota State. New Mexico, on the other hand, barely competed in their 8 losses. They were 11th in times of possession last year, so they were able to grind down opponents, especially the weaker run defenses. Montana State looks like they'll be able to match them stride for stride, though, in the trenches. I'll take them to cover. not overly confident in it, as this is still an FBS opponent at the end of the day. And its QB should be able to make some big plays. I think Dampier will impress a little bit. Overall, I think they'll still make some silly mistakes against what is a pretty disciplined team that was very good a season ago. So I think I'm going to give them a slight cover as well, Nick. I'm not as confident in it. Are you more confident than me, or which way you lean, even though I do see your score has it being very closely contested as well?
Yeah, I have an 11-point game here. I'm not highly confident on this. I think this is a game where you look at it, where I think they're going to get the line spot on. It could, at the end of the day, finish, a 10-point win for Montana State or an 8-point win for Montana State. I really think it's going to be that close of a toss-up. I think when you have that massive talent gap between FBS and FCS, there's always going to be that sort of capability for this to be a great game for the FBS team to go out and dominate. I like what Montana State has. I think their offense is going to be able to get them over the line in the end, but this is certainly a tight contest, a very interesting contest in Week 0, certainly a game that if you love college football, you should tune in, because I think Montana State are a very strong team in the FCS. New Mexico are a weaker FBS team that has some interesting pieces. Definitely a game worth checking out if you're a football fan at 4 o'clock, kind of figuring out what direction this goes in a battle between FCS and FBS.
Now looking at the next contest, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, SMU travels to Reno to take on the Wolfpack. And what is a large spread at 25, at least at the time of us recording this, will probably continue to move forward. Mustangs get back their top 6 pass catchers, top 3 running backs. They had great balance. They have a veteran quarterback in Preston Stone. Matchup is very favorable. Nevada ranked outside top 115 in numerous categories: run D, pass D, tackles for loss, and scoring. Only get back 5 starters from the side of the ball. They do get back 2 starting linebackers led by Drew Watts. Pretty undersized interior defensive line. Thomas Whitey, for example, is only 261 pounds, and he's from Alaska, Nick. That's not great to hear. Nelson Rapati, a 280-pounder from the College of San Francisco. Added another transfer in Caden Johnson at DN from Wisconsin. Jonathan Maldonado wasn't all that great in his appearances at the other DN spot. So this is a pretty weak D-line overall. Just seems like it's going to get abused versus tempo. Pass D did get better on the stretch for Nevada, and they do return some veterans at corner, and Michael Coates, KK Meyer. They do lose a high-end safety, though, in Imani Johnson. But I think Keyshawn Cobb and Keaton Crawford are actually pretty respectable additions in the portal. Could be beneficial for the secondary. Overall, they were 129th in FBS and most 40-plus plays allowed. I mean, this is just screaming on paper, Nick. The SMU is going to dominate these guys here. And Rhett Lashley's a guy that will certainly look to run up the score a little bit just to get different guys involved and get that chemistry and tempo going. This is just a nightmare matchup for Nevada, it seems. As long as they don't make silly mistakes and turn the ball over, they're going to score a lot of points.
We've seen Rhett Lashley's SMU team run the score up several times against weaker opponents, as we've seen them drop a ton on some of their inferior conference opponents when they were previously in the AAC. They move over to the ACC this year, and they kick off their tenure in that conference with a trip out west to Reno. This offense is very exciting. They return so much talent. Preston Stone at quarterback, I think, is a phenomenal quarterback. He's really great in the pocket, can also run as well. Jalen Knighton behind him at running back is a very fast back. I like his footwork, like the speed he has. I think Knighton will be really solid. I like the tempo they can run. I've seen this offense in person. The tempo, the fast pace of it's very solid. I think they have great wide receiving options as well. Jordan Hudson, I like him at the X. Jake Bailey in the slot is a good target. The offensive line worries me a little bit for this SMU team, but I do think it has enough pieces to get them over the line. When you look at the Nevada defense, it is just a weak unit across the board. They bring in Kitten Crawford and Keyshawn Cobb, who are not bad ads, that is. I think they could be okay in the secondary. I worry about what they have on the defensive line. I know they brought in Caden Johnson, a right defensive end, who I think could be a solid player off the edge. I do like his pressure ability to get in the backfield. But like you said, if SMU avoids mistakes, they keep focused and just run the tempo offense like they normally do, they're going to absolutely blow this Nevada defense off the field. I think they're going to run up the score, put up a ton of points. They're going to be very effective with Knight and Stone. I think it's a really nice 1-2 punch they have. I'm not worried about this SMU offense at all. I think they have a nice secondary, or a nice chance here to absolutely blow away this bad secondary for Nevada.
On the other side, Nevada returns another 5 starters for what was a poor offense, 127th in total, and then 127th in points per game. Looks like Brendan Lewis will be the starter, who I don't think is a very good quarterback one bit, but he might be pushed heavily by Choba Purdy, who I think is a little beat up, though. They lose their top 6 pass catchers. They do add 2 transfers, Cortez Braham, Marcus Bellin, who had less than 30 targets each in the 2 years at their previous schools. They do add some solid players in Savion Red and Pat Garwo, both being big power backs, mixed in with the return of leading rusher Sean Dollars. I think Garwo will likely not be healthy for this game, but this is a pretty good backfield, one of the better ones in the conference. Behind an offensive line, though, that was one of the nation's worst and has a lot of moving pieces, but some experience. Issues they face a defensive line led by standout Elijah Roberts and what is an incredibly deep defensive line. I'll save I'll save the names from you because there's like 7 or 8 guys. I think they're pretty important players for SMU. They do get back 2 veterans at linebacker behind them as well. So, I mean, the SMU defense has proven to be a legit unit. And there isn't much path to success here other than a heavy dose of that run game. And you can hope you can just outwill them with physicality. And I think Lewis's legs might get involved a little bit as well. So that's the only real path to victory here. Maybe some coverage busts, Nick. But obviously, the stuff I'm talking about, you're just kind of leaning on luck at this point against this SMU defense because the Mustangs are a legit unit on this side of the ball. And you've seen it last year on their way to winning that conference title.
I think one of the biggest keys for the SMU defense in week 1 is how does the linebacking unit look? I like what they have. I think Kobe Wilson, Ahmed Walker, and Alexander Kilgore are all really strong players. Kilgore especially, who was a true freshman last year. He's hoping to continue to get rotational reps at middle linebacker, a really solid player behind Kobe Wilson, who's a veteran who's been around the game for a while. I think the secondary is a decent enough unit for this SMU team, plus a solid defensive line that brought in Anthony Booker Jr. at nose tackle. I think it was a solid add out of the portal. The offense for Nevada, I worry a little bit about it. I think Savion Red's a great back, a really solid add. I'm excited to see what Red can do for this offense. He's going to take over and be that number 1 back. Previously was at Texas, a really good add out of the portal. This is a guy that I think can be a big impact player, certainly later on the season for this team when they get to Mountain West Conference play. I do like what they have there. Brandon Lewis, I don't have a lot of faith in him at quarterback. I don't really know if he's going to be able to do anything. I expect him to have a few turnovers in this game. I think he's going to be a little bit rattled, make mistakes. The wide receiving room had some nice pieces. Marcus Bellon is a really solid add. Cortez Braum is not a bad one either. Marshawn Brown at the wide receiver Z is a good player who's a redshirt freshman last year. They got some nice reps. The offensive line was pretty woeful last year. I think the SMU defensive line will dominate said offensive line. Things are looking very difficult for Nevada in this week 0 matchup. I think SMU has a really physical defense, will force some turnovers and keep the score low in terms of points by Nevada.
Yeah, I think final thoughts, Nevada's going to get smoked in this game. SMU plays great defense. They're going to be able to score if it's tempo and efficient play. Slash and running game will have a big day. Mustangs want to make a statement entering the ACC, and a big victory will give them adequate momentum. I think they cover with ease the total. I'm not as confident in because Nevada, I think, needs to score at least 1 touchdown. They need to cover their end of the bargain. I don't see SMU scoring all 58 by themselves unless they want to, which I don't know if they're going to look to run it up quite that much on the road, but, it's possible they do. Moving to the nightcap, Nick, played at about midnight. Is going to be Hawaii hosting Delaware State. And obviously, we're the only ones in the world, I think, previewing this game. But I love this stuff, looking at these interesting contests when not much is going on and trying to find value in a line that is being offered publicly. 38-point line in favor of Hawaii. 55.5 is the total. And we'll go ahead and give you some interesting numbers. The Hornets, they went 1-10 last season. They averaged 13.6 points per game. Offense is all about running back Marquise Gillis and Marquell Adams at quarterback. The two combined for over 900 rushing and 6 touchdowns. The team only had 7 rushing touchdowns all year. Adams as a passer completed only 56%, 112 a game, 7 picks, only 5 touchdowns. And they are facing a defense in Hawaii. It gets back 8 starters. They were 104th versus the run themselves, returned some of their best players. Ezra Ivamalo, David Williams, Tariq Jones on the D-line. Jalen Smith was pretty good at linebacker. Past D had some struggles, but versus weaker competition in conference, they typically dominated, and they do get back a leader in safety, Peter Manuma. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Nick, if you really have any? This is not a good offense from the FCS level going against the Hawaii defense. That's not no great unit of themselves, but in this matchup, it's going to be easy for them.
This is a very interesting matchup, certainly a college football sickos matchup. If you're a real college football fan, you'll be up on Saturday night watching this. It's 5,000 miles roughly from Delaware to Hawaii, so quite the trip that Delaware State's making. I can't quite fathom why they're making the trip out to Hawaii. I guess they're getting paid a significant amount of money to make this trip. This is a very weak Hornets team that went 1-10 last year. Yes, they returned their bulk of their offensive production in Gillis and Adams. They averaged only 13.6 points per game last year, and they're getting absolutely blown out here. This is a game that you and I have been talking about because it's kind of just crazy that this is a matchup that's happening. But these games got to get played. These colleges got to make money somehow from these bye games. And I guess Hawaii was looking for somebody, and Delaware volunteered to literally cross the continent and the Pacific Ocean to get out for this matchup. I think Hawaii is going to absolutely dominate. I think this is going to be a completely lopsided game. They'll be over within the first minute. But certainly if you want to get some late night action, if you're looking to fill a kick and have a little bit of fun at minus 38, I don't think that's too lofty of a spread at all. I really think Hawaii could absolutely run the numbers up if they feel like it, considering they're not a bad offense at all. I think they have enough talent returning to be a decent team in their conferences here.
Yeah, the Hawaii offense is a fun one. They only put up 21 points per game. Braden Shager aired it out a ton, 40 attempts per game, did have 14 picks, got sacked the 115th most times in FBS. They also had the second worst rushing attack in college football. Plenty of options at receiver, though. Top 6 guys are back. Stephen McBride, Pafel Ashlock, combined for 1,800 yards and 9 touchdowns each. Offense, again, certainly left lots on the table. Being awful in the red zone, only 55% TD rate, lots of giveaways. They face a defense that allowed 38 points per game, 445 yards per game, 223 of those coming via the ground. They do get back their leading tackler, Mario Goings, top defensive line Baron Darian Cook, who had 8.5 TFL as well. Just to give you the numbers there, Nick. And the final prediction here, Hawaii played a pretty good offense in what was an 11-win FCS U-Albany team last season, and they dominated them. An 11-point victory. This team that they were playing is straight up awful. They lost 7 games by double figures. They lost 63-0 to Army, 62-20 to Miami of Ohio. Those are, I would say, pretty comparable FCS opponents, I guess you could say. They were somewhat respectable distance in terms of travel. And again, now they take a 5K mile flight out to Honolulu, Nick. And then a couple days later, they have to turn around and play another game as their season's kicking off in high gear. This is just ridiculous. I don't know what they're doing. Like you said, they must be getting paid a lot. 58-0 for me. You have them winning by 52 as well. They should cover this spread. I think the book has this one wrong, Nick. I don't know how you even come up with this one, but I think 38 is a little too low because I think they're just going to run the table in this one unless they don't feel the need to, put their foot on the gas for 4 quarters. Doesn't matter. This is week 0. We're in August, Nick. You need to go ahead and maximize your opportunities, and this is going to be a majorly lopsided score, covering a total by themselves.
Your final point there, maybe what the books are thinking is that, hey, maybe Hawaii takes it easy, has some sympathy for their opponent that is traveling 5,000 miles to get blown out, but I just don't see it happening that way. I think Hawaii will cover the 38 points and take this, win, get this one to the book and call it a day. Delaware State, this is a tough trip for a team that was not very good at all last year. I wasn't even thinking about the time zone adjustment for these guys coming from the East Coast all the way to the Hawaii time. Just a brutal adjustment, brutal travel, completely brutal across the board. This is shaping up to be a complete blowout by the Rainbow Warriors. This is a team that looks like they can just go absolutely out there and dominate on the ground, dominate through the air, and really just pick apart this horrendous Delaware State team. But you and I will both be watching this game. We'll be tuned in and keeping tabs on it as it is. College football is back. Whatever form it is, college football is back. We want to watch it. I'm excited to watch all 4 of these games, even if this nightcap leaves a lot to be desired.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.